This is present day Chloe. Today is June 24, 2019. The video that you're about to see is from December, January 2018, 2019-ish, so it's been a couple months. For all of you repeat watchers out there, thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. I'm sorry you have to hear the same spiel again. Hello, I'm Chloe. I did get accepted to Oxford PPE. This is my economics interview. Check out my politics and philosophy interviews if you haven't yet. So I did get accepted to Oxford PPE, Hartford College, but I am not there. I'm currently a freshman at Chicago, or like a rising sophomore. I just finished off my freshman year. I mainly post about college, Oxford, Mon. I did IB in high school, so I'll be posting about that too. College application videos, college lifestyle. I feel kind of weird filming this at work, but like it's literally 8 a.m. There's no one here, so I figured I'd just help myself to film time. That's about it. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video useful. If I covered both my eyes with my hair, do you think my econ professor won't be able to see me anymore? Today I'm going to be talking about my economics interview, which arguably was the worst interview because I had to do it twice. Watch my Oxford PPE interview overall experience if you want to know why. The first time on day 2 and the second time on day 4 happened in the Hartford Econ building. So you go to the old lodge 10 minutes before the interview. Volunteers bring you to your interview room or waiting room, and then you wait until the professor calls you in. So immediately off the bat, what was different was because I had to wait at the foot of 2 flights of stairs instead of waiting in like a waiting room. The Econ building was extremely narrow, at least the stairwell, and the interview took place on the highest floor. It was like an attic. But once you go in, floors carpeted, there was a whiteboard there. You sat down in this like examination chair because they had like the flipboard thing you could fill out, like you could flip out and you could like write on it. Yeah, and then one female professor, another male professor. First econ interview. Hi, shake hand. Immediately gave me a question. It was very simple. There's sandwich shop A, and then there's sandwich shop B. Whatever price their sandwiches are, sandwich shop A has X amount of people who will definitely go there, and sandwich shop B has X plus something amount of people who will definitely go there. The question was like, how should they deal with pricing? Because there were 100 total customers in this area, and even taking out the customers going to these 2 shops, the remaining customers would buy their sandwiches at whichever shop had the cheapest sandwich, right? And then I basically had to solve the question on the whiteboard. What price would the 2 shops want to sell at? The interviewer would ask me from the perspective of shop A, what price should they sell it at? What are some concerns are with this price? And then in the perspective of shop B, basically it was game theory and talking about the Nash equilibrium. Now the scary part about the econ interview is that if you think for more than 2 to 3 seconds, they prompt you or she prompts you. So I remember looking at the paper, reading the question, and she was like, do you have an answer? And I was like, wait, I replied via reflex. I was like, wait a second. And then she asked again, oh, do you have an answer? And I was like low-key panicking because this is like, I've only had this for 6 seconds, let me breathe. Not say that. Imagine if I did. Went up to the whiteboard and I basically outlined it. Like I drew some sort of diagram that basically like most efficiently shows the what price range that the people can buy at. Yeah, that question was pretty easy, so that went by really quickly. The male professor, who I've kept quiet throughout this entire process, then passed me a piece of paper. The piece of paper that he gave me was a picture of country GDP, and the countries there were a lot of different countries. He asked me to analyze the data, so I stared at it for like a few seconds, and again he prompted me, do you have an answer? And I was like, in a second. He asked me as like a sub question, what do you think the x-axis represents? What do you think the y-axis represents? Because they don't show you what the x and y-axis were, but they do show you what the graph is for. So I answered the x-axis is most probably this, the y-axis is most probably this, and he was like, that is correct. What are some trends you see, or is there a trend? And then I was like, no. And I said, but if you look more specifically at this group of data, there might be a possible trend there. And he looked at, he was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And that was that. He gave me another graph that showed like a few countries. He isolated a lot of countries and showed me just those countries. And then he asked like, oh, now do you think that there is a trend? Yeah, I see a trend now. And then he said, what do you see? And then I told him what I saw, and he said, how do you think you would deal with the outliers? And then I remember I responded with like a really standard answer. And then I started to say something Like, usually in statistics you would, and I didn't finish. He cut me off and he was like, no, I don't want to know what usually they do. I want to know what you think and how you would deal with the outlier. Then I paused for like half a second and I said, okay, in this scenario, I would do this, 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 this. Yeah. And then that was it. 20 minutes was up. He was like, thank you. And then the female person was like, thank you, you can leave now. And then I left. And in the minute I left, I was like, oh my god, 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 oh my god. I completely screwed up my interview. Because I was pausing, they were prompting me. Pretty sure I spent too much time on the first question. I don't think I answered the second, like the graph questions very well, and they were looking at me like I was like a disappointment. It might have just been me overreacting, but apparently a lot of people felt like their econ interview was terrible. Yeah, that was basically it. And then the night I got that notice for a re-interview for econ, I knew it. I was like, damn it. Ah! Hi, this is Editing Chloe again. So I actually was told that like afterwards by my politics professor. I saw him again because he actually gave me feedback. I'm not sure if I covered that during my politics interview, but he actually gave me feedback. And afterwards I saw him again. He was like, how were the interviews? And I told him, well, I got an econ re-interview. And he actually told me that it's actually not that big of a deal. Some students get it. It's not really so much that you were like on the fence, but rather they wanted to make sure what kind of student you were once you were admitted to Harvard College. Like, for example, if you know this, PPE, you don't study all 3 subjects equally. You get to pick 2 to concentrate on later on. And then the econ professor apparently wanted to make sure, they wanted to make sure what 2 each student would kind of choose. They want to like make sure there's like a more, it's just they don't want every single student to pick the same 2 like concentrations because they only take 9 people, right? And so they don't want to make sure that didn't happen. And so what I got out of that was like maybe I performed better out of the other candidates for the econ interview, because then they might be considering that I should do like politics and econ or philosophy and econ or something like that. So this was all afterwards. I had no idea about this during the interviews and I was freaking out. I knew I screwed up my econ interview, but then I was given a second chance. But I knew, you know, which part I screwed up on, which was probably the game theory, like the first question. So the night before, I went online, looked at a bunch of like game theory questions, like multiplayer, 3-player, 4-player, things like that. So same location, same stairwell, goes up, same attic, professor just sitting at the exact same place, same whiteboard, gives me a piece of paper. This time we're talking about auctioning in a painting, and I am an appraiser for a company, and I am evaluating this painting, or rather I'm deciding whether do we want to buy this painting. And I know that the standard price for this painting is this much. The auction starts at this much of money, and people in the room, the way the auction works is like a more standard auction. Like I bring up I bring up a price, they bring up a price, someone else brings up a price, I can bring it up again, and then people bid until you have the highest bidder, right? And then the interviewer asked me, in this case, how much would you bid? And then I gave her an answer. I told her that in this scenario where the bidding depends on what other people have bid, basically Nash equilibrium game theory, I would bid not so high at first. I told her like a specific number based on the numbers they gave me, and she was like, why would you bid this number if it is below what the appraiser in your company have appraised it as? For example, they appraised it at 4 million, but I would only bid 3 million. And then I said the whole point of an auction is trying to get your money's worth, right? Or even, if possible, trying to get more than what your money's worth. So even knowing that your appraiser has given this for this much doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start off the auction this way. And I talked about it a little bit more, and she was like, okay, then what if now that item has passed and now you have another item, and this item's bidding method is slightly different. Everyone has to put in a number at first, and the person who pitches the highest price gets the painting. But you pay it but the price you pay is the second highest price, if that makes any sense. So all the bidders put in their amounts of money into an envelope. The auction house gathers all these envelopes and then ranks them in terms of how large the amount is. And then the person who puts in the most amount of money gets the painting, but they don't pay the price that they put down. They pay the price of the second bidder. It's the second highest bidder. And so she asked me, in this scenario, how much would you bid? And how would your logic be different than the first scenario? And then I answered her, I would bid much, much higher than I would in this first scenario. And she was like, why? What if you're not getting your money's worth? What if you're getting like if you're paying 5 million for a painting that is worth 4 million. And then she said, how do you know if your company wants this painting or not? And then, you know, I told her, like, in this scenario, it depends on like how much you want the painting, and also it depends on like how much money I have on my hands. Because I forgot to mention, for the first scenario, it was like I have an option whether to buy the painting or not, but for this scenario, it's I have to acquire the painting. So then I talked about how I would bid at the highest amount, so within my budget, I'll bid my maximum. And she would be like, she was like, oh, why would you do so, something. And I replied her. And finally we came to the stage where she asked me, how much would you value the appraiser's price point, and how do you think like this item would be, like this item's price would be determined in this bidding system compared to the other bidding system? So I answered her, and apparently that was like nearing the end of the video. I got another graph from the male professor, but it was a very brief session. He sent it to me. He asked me again, do you see a trend? I said no. He said, how about in this part? I was like, yes. And then what trend? Describes the trend, describes the y and x-axis. He's like, what would you do with the outliers? And I described what I would do. The questions he asked me were the same as the first interview, but the graphs were completely different. So that way I kind of understood that I probably screwed up the game theory part more, because my questions the second time round were a lot more specific and took up a lot more time. If I didn't study econ at all, because I do IB economics, if I didn't study econ at all, I would still be able to answer these questions. So I think that in asking game theory question and asking to analyze graphs, it was a really smart decision on the college's side, because you could evaluate students' way of thinking without them having to have this prerequisite of like an economics course. Because there were definitely PPE finalists that I met at the college that did not pick econ as their high school course. So yeah, for the questions in this video, I will also tell you guys that I think they are a lot more reliable for you to reference than the questions in the other videos. And the reason is because there was another PPE student from my school who was also there for an interview, but she was at another college. And after this whole experience, we, you know, like asked, oh, what kind of questions were you asked? What kind of questions were I asked? And we were asked very similar questions. I don't know if they were exactly the same because we didn't exchange until that degree, but I know that she was asked questions regarding game theory and also regarding graphs. Yeah. So I hope this was really helpful. I would have thought it to be really helpful, but obviously I'm done already. So leave a comment below if it was helpful or not, if you wanted to know like some more specific examples, or if you basically have any question about how to prepare, or like anything basically. Yeah, I hope this enjoyed. Yeah, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, anything.